Hello brothers and welcome to Sigma Old Man channel. Not every woman deserves a seat at the table of a man who doesn't even need a table to begin with. Let that settle in for a second. Because we're not talking about your average, predictable, crowd-pleasing man here. We're talking about the Sigma male, the lone strategist, the quiet storm, the kind of man who walks into a room full of loud people and still somehow dominates it without saying a word. Now here's a little fact to chew on. Over 70% of women say they're attracted to emotionally intelligent, independent men, yet those same women panic when those men don't text back in 5 minutes. That's the paradox. Because a Sigma male doesn't operate on society's relationship timeline. He doesn't want a cheerleader, a fan, or someone who melts under silence. He wants a woman so self-possessed, so unfazed by the noise of the world that his silence feels like home to her. She's not just rare, she's borderline mythical. This video isn't about what Sigma males want in general. No. This is about the one type of woman who's actually strong enough, sharp enough, and unshakable enough to stand next to a man who answers to no one. And if you think this is about being sweet or supportive, you're already 3 exits off the highway. Let's dive in. This isn't for the faint-hearted or the attention-hungry. Number 1, she doesn't need a crowd to validate her. She's her own kingdom. She doesn't need a crowd to validate her because she is the crowd. You won't catch her fishing for approval, applause, or someone to constantly reassure her that she's doing great. Her confidence doesn't come from likes, compliments, or someone texting her back. It's not loud, it's not flashy. It's the kind that sits quietly in the corner, sipping tea while everyone else burns out trying to be seen. And that's exactly why a Sigma male sees her, because he knows the difference between real presence and desperate performance. This woman moves like she owns the room, even if nobody's looking, not because she's trying to dominate, but because she genuinely doesn't care if anyone's watching. That kind of self-assurance is intoxicating to a Sigma male. He sees a woman who doesn't crumble under isolation, doesn't obsess over popularity, and doesn't need a parade of people to feel alive. And that makes her dangerous, in the most beautiful way. She doesn't overshare, she doesn't overcompensate. She doesn't need to prove herself every 5 minutes. Her energy is so complete, it speaks for itself. You either notice or you don't, but she's not here to beg for attention. The same way a Sigma male doesn't try to belong, she doesn't try to be understood. And when these two energies collide, something rare happens. Mutual recognition, no chases, no games, just 2 self-sufficient people who see each other clearly without trying to own, fix, or complete one another. She could walk into a crowded room alone, not knowing a single person, and still leave with everyone wondering who she was. Not because she was loud, but because she was complete. And that's what pulls a Sigma male in like gravity. He doesn't want someone who needs him to feel whole. He wants someone who's already whole, someone whose solitude doesn't scare her because she's mastered it just like he has. She's not intimidated by his independence because hers is just as fierce. She's not looking to orbit around his world. She's already built her own kingdom. And when she walks beside him, she doesn't shrink to make him shine. She walks in her own light. That's why he doesn't just like her, he respects her. And for a Sigma male, respect is everything. Number 2, she doesn't try to tame him, she matches his wild. She doesn't try to fix him, soften him, or turn him into someone easier to digest. That's where most people mess up. They see a Sigma male's independence, his silence, his refusal to play social games, and immediately think something's wrong. Not her. She doesn't treat him like a broken project. She treats him like a rare force of nature. He's unpredictable, sometimes intense, always thinking 10 steps ahead, and she's not intimidated by any of it. She thrives in that chaos because she carries her own version of it. She's not trying to domesticate a wild mind. She's got her own sharp instincts and untamed energy that doesn't bow to convention either. She's not the type to hand him a schedule and expect emotional check-ins at 5 p.m. If anything, she'd toss the rule book out and ask if he wants to disappear into the mountains for a week just to breathe different air. That's the kind of woman he can't ignore because she gets him. Not with soft words or people-pleasing energy, but with that raw, unfiltered realness that says, I don't need to control you, I'm already free. She doesn't pull him into a cage and call it love. She doesn't demand constant updates or emotional hand-holding. She runs beside him, not behind him, and definitely not in front trying to steer. She lets him lead when he needs to, but she's got enough power and clarity to take the reins when things go sideways. And he respects that. Because this isn't about submission, it's about synchronization. A Sigma male is allergic to people who try to clip his wings or make him more palatable. He's been misunderstood most of his life, labeled as distant or arrogant, when really he just refuses to fake connection. So when he meets a woman who doesn't try to dim his intensity but instead brings her own fire, they don't calm each other down. They amplify. It's not always easy, but it's never boring. And for a Sigma male, boredom is the real enemy. She doesn't want to change him. She just wants to run wild with him. No map, no leash, no rules, just instinct and mutual freedom. That's the only way he ever lets someone close. Number 3. She can sit in a room with him and say nothing and still be heard. She doesn't need to force conversation to feel connected. She's not uncomfortable in silence, and she doesn't mistake quiet for distance. While most people rush to fill every pause with noise, questions, or nervous chatter, she sits still, and somehow that stillness says everything. Her presence is loud in the most understated way. When she's in the room, the energy shifts, not because she's trying to command attention, but because she's completely at ease in her own skin. That kind of calm is rare, and a Sigma male notices it instantly. He doesn't need entertainment. He needs peace. He needs someone who doesn't make him feel like he's on a stage, performing. And when she's around, he feels like he can finally drop the act. Not because she asked him to, but because she never expected one in the first place. The way she carries herself, the way she's comfortable just being, it's magnetic. It's not about playing roles or saying the right thing. It's about presence. Pure, grounded presence that doesn't beg for attention but commands it anyway. She's not checking her phone every 5 seconds. She's not anxious about what to say next. She's not trying to impress him with endless opinions. She's just there, fully, effortlessly, and unbothered. And in that space, something rare happens. He feels seen, even when no words are exchanged. It's a kind of connection that doesn't rely on dialogue. It's built on energy, awareness, and trust in the silence. That's what separates her from the rest. She doesn't confuse stillness with emptiness. She understands that some of the most powerful moments between two people happen without speaking at all. And when she's next to a Sigma male, she doesn't pressure him to open up. She just makes space for him to feel safe if he chooses to. That safety doesn't come from questions, it comes from presence. And that's a currency Sigma males rarely find. She doesn't speak to fill silence, she speaks when it matters. And when she doesn't speak, he still hears her, because everything about her, her calm, her energy, her self-possession, says more than words ever could. Number 4, she has zero interest in control, only connection. She's not counting texts, keeping score, or testing how far she can push before he bends. She doesn't drop subtle guilt trips or manipulate moods just to feel in control. That stuff is beneath her, and it repels her just as much as it repels him. She's not interested in control because she doesn't need it. Real power doesn't scramble for dominance, it just is, and that's why she stands out. She approaches him with curiosity, not conquest, with respect, not strategy. She knows he's not the type to be caged, coerced, or cornered. A Sigma male sees straight through emotional power plays, and when someone tries to pull those strings, he cuts the whole puppet show loose. But with her, there are no strings, just raw, unfiltered connection, honest, clean, and pressure-free. She doesn't need to be above him to feel valuable. Her worth isn't measured in how much control she has over another person. It's rooted in who she is when no one's watching. She doesn't seek connection through ownership. She doesn't try to change how he expresses love or monitor every move to feel secure. She accepts that sometimes love doesn't look like a checklist. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's space. Sometimes it's just being there without needing to win. That kind of acceptance disarms a Sigma male because it's so rare. He's used to being treated like a problem to solve, a project to fix, or a trophy to claim. But she's not playing that game, and because she's not trying to control him, he trusts her. That trust turns into loyalty, the kind that doesn't waver, doesn't flinch, and doesn't need to be constantly reaffirmed. It's not built on fear of loss, it's built on mutual freedom. He stays not because he's trapped, but because he's safe. Safe to be who he is, safe to evolve, safe to open up without being manipulated or managed. That's the magic. She's not trying to steer the ship, she just wants to sail next to him. And in a world full of people who confuse control with love, she's the one woman who truly understands the difference. That's why he doesn't just want her, he chooses her over and over again. Number 5, she doesn't fear his darkness, she walks through her own. She doesn't flinch when his mood shifts. She doesn't run when his silence gets heavier, or when his eyes say more than his mouth ever will. She's met that darkness before, just in her own reflection. And that's why she doesn't fear his. Most people panic when they see a side of someone that's not polished or pleasant. They want the highlight reel. She's lived through the raw footage. She's been cracked open by life, picked herself up from rock bottom without applause, and rebuilt a version of herself that doesn't need to be sugar-coated to be loved. So when the Sigma male withdraws into his cave, when he retreats, overthinks, or wrestles with things he doesn't know how to say, she doesn't get needy or offended. She doesn't try to drag him back into the light like he's broken. She simply lets him be, because she knows the value of darkness. She's learned more in her storms than others have in their sunshine. That emotional depth gives her an edge. Not the fake aesthetic kind that people post about, but real, lived-in experience that sharpened her mind and toughened her spirit. Her strength doesn't come from pretending to be unbothered. It comes from being bothered and surviving anyway. And that's exactly why she intrigues him. She's not trying to look perfect, be soft all the time, or radiate toxic positivity. She's layered. She's got stories that don't need to be told to be felt. There's a weight to her presence that only exists in people who've met their own darkness and made peace with it. That's what makes her different. She doesn't look at his emotional complexity as a red flag. She looks at it as proof that he's real. And he sees that she's not just saying, "I'm here for you," because it sounds nice. He knows she's saying it because she's been there. She knows the silence. She knows the chaos. She knows what it feels like to be misunderstood even when you're screaming inside. So when he finds her, it's not just chemistry, it's recognition. He doesn't have to filter his darkness. He doesn't have to shrink it or explain it. She's already walked through her own. And that's why she can walk beside his without blinking. Number 6, she's too rare to be replaced, even by his solitude. He's not afraid of being alone. In fact, he thrives in it. Solitude is his sanctuary, not his punishment. Most people fear the silence. He feeds off it. That's why he's so hard to keep. He doesn't chase company. He doesn't fill space just to avoid emptiness. He's used to walking alone, and he does it with pride. So if someone's going to be in his life, they have to bring something that solitude can't, something he can't give himself, and she does. She doesn't just match his peace, she enhances it, not by being loud or dramatic, but by being undeniably rare. The kind of woman whose presence feels like alignment, not noise. The kind of woman whose energy doesn't interrupt his inner calm. It adds to it. That's the difference. With most people, solitude always wins. But with her, losing her would feel like losing a part of the world that doesn't exist anywhere else, because no matter how much he loves his own company, there's a space only she fills. And if she were gone, he wouldn't just go back to being alone. He'd feel the void. She's not just unforgettable because she's beautiful, intelligent, or composed. She's unforgettable because she never tried to be. She just is, authentically, unapologetically herself. No games, no masks, no attempt to blend in. And that kind of presence hits harder than any loud, attention-seeking performance ever could. She doesn't compete with solitude. She doesn't need to. She becomes the exception to it. He could go days without needing a soul, but if she pulled away, the silence wouldn't feel like peace anymore. It would feel like absence, like missing something he didn't even know he wanted before she came along. That's the impact of someone irreplaceable. They don't just take up space in your life. They change how that space feels when they're not in it. She's not the kind of woman you just move on from. She's the one that lingers in your thoughts long after she's gone. The one whose energy ruins shallow connections for good. And even for a Sigma male who finds comfort in being alone, she's the one person whose absence would echo louder than silence ever could. Number 7, she's comfortable being unseen because she sees herself. She's not fighting to be noticed. She's not bending herself into trends, filters, or flashy performances just to prove she matters. She knows she does, whether anyone claps or not. While the world shouts louder and louder just to be heard, she's quiet and yet somehow impossible to ignore. That's the paradox. She doesn't need validation from the outside because she's already validated herself on the inside. And for a Sigma male who's allergic to superficial praise and fake personas, That quiet self-assurance hits like lightning. She's comfortable walking into a room and not being the center of it. She doesn't dress to be watched, speak to be praised, or move to impress. She moves like someone who knows the weight of her presence even when no one's watching. That's real confidence, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. She can go unnoticed by the world and still glow like she's lit from within. And the Sigma male, he sees that glow immediately, because he operates the same way. He's built his life in the shadows, away from noise, away from performance. He doesn't want loud, he wants real. What stuns him isn't her looks or achievements, it's her inner calm, the kind that can't be faked, the kind that doesn't need to dominate a conversation to be remembered. She doesn't collect followers like trophies or spin her life into curated perfection. She's real, raw, and centered. She sees herself clearly, flaws and all, and still stands solid. That's rare, that's magnetic, and that's exactly why he's drawn in. She's not desperate to be seen because she's already seen herself. She's done the work, faced her shadows, found her worth without needing it spelled out by someone else. That invisible power, it's not loud, but it's deadly. It cuts through pretense and ego like a blade. And to a Sigma male who's spent his life watching people perform identities like costumes, she's a breath of clean air, grounded, whole, unshakable. She's not trying to shine brighter than everyone, she just refuses to dim her light for anyone. And without even trying, she becomes unforgettable, not for how much attention she demands, but for how deeply she knows who she is. That kind of woman, you don't meet her often, and once you do, nothing else feels quite as real. Number 8, she doesn't emotionally dump, she emotionally discerns. She doesn't treat him like an emotional dumping ground just because he listens well. She knows the difference between being vulnerable and being reckless with emotions. She's not going to explode every passing thought, mood, or insecurity onto him just to feel better for 5 minutes. That's not emotional intimacy, it's emotional laziness, and she's too self-aware for that. Instead, she processes her emotions before speaking. She sits with them, she sorts them out. And when she finally shares, it's with intention, not desperation. She's not silent or secretive, she's selective. She doesn't fear expressing herself. She just doesn't hand over unfiltered chaos and expect him to carry it. She respects his peace because she respects her own first. And that emotional discipline, that's what earns his respect. Because for a Sigma male, peace isn't negotiable. He's not built to deal with constant emotional drama, needy spirals, or someone expecting him to fix problems they haven't even tried to understand themselves. He wants depth, yes, but not at the cost of sanity. With her, emotional sharing isn't a flood, it's a flow, steady, thoughtful, and always with purpose. She brings him into her world without overwhelming him with it. She invites him in rather than dumping it all on his lap and walking away. That difference is everything. It shows maturity, it shows strength, and it shows she's not just emotionally aware, she's emotionally intelligent. She also doesn't weaponize feelings. She won't say things in the heat of the moment just to hurt. She won't twist vulnerability into manipulation. She holds herself accountable for how she feels, and she doesn't make him responsible for moods she hasn't tried to manage herself. That kind of emotional ownership is rare, and to a Sigma male, it's priceless. It tells him she's not looking for a savior. She's looking for someone who gets it. Someone who understands that not every emotion needs to be aired in real time just to be valid. So when she opens up, it matters. He listens more closely. He leans in. Because he knows she's not talking just to talk. She's talking because what she says is real, refined, and rooted in truth. And in a world drowning in emotional noise, that kind of discernment is pure gold. Number 9, she doesn't chase his silence, she decodes it. She doesn't need to fill the air with words every time he withdraws. While most women might take it personally, filling the silence with questions or self-doubt, she understands that silence is his way of resetting, not distancing. She doesn't panic when he pulls back. Instead, she uses that time to read him. She understands that his mind is a labyrinth, and sometimes the best thing she can do is give him space to find his way through it. She doesn't crowd him or make assumptions. She watches his behavior, his energy, and how he holds himself in those moments. It's a language all its own, and she's fluent in it. She doesn't chase after him when he goes quiet. She respects that silence. She knows that while he's recharging, he's not abandoning her. There's a quiet understanding between them that allows for those moments of solitude without tension.
She trusts him enough to know that when he's quiet, he's not shutting her out. He's preparing himself, gathering his thoughts, or just letting his mind breathe for a bit. She's comfortable with this rhythm because she's not insecure about their connection. She doesn't need constant validation to feel secure in his feelings for her. She doesn't assume the worst when he's silent. Instead, she decodes it. She picks up on the subtle cues. The slight shift in his posture, the way his thoughts seem to drift, the occasional distant look in his eyes. These are all part of the unspoken language between them. She knows he's not rejecting her. He's simply taking time to process whatever is on his mind. And she's okay with that because she knows the value of silence. Sometimes it speaks more than words ever could. She's not intimidated by the quiet. In fact, she values it because it's a sign of the trust they share. She understands that some of his deepest thoughts and feelings can't be put into words just yet. The silence doesn't bother her, it only deepens her curiosity. And that's the key. She's not afraid of his retreat because she knows it's not about her, it's about him, and she gives him the space to be himself, knowing that in time he'll return, more whole, more present, and ready to share. And when he does, she'll be there, not as someone who chased his silence, but as someone who honored it.
Number 10, she has a life so solid, his absence doesn't shake it. She's not someone who revolves around him, waiting for his attention to validate her existence. She's built her own world, one that's rich, fulfilling, and entirely hers. Her life doesn't hinge on his presence. In fact, she thrives in her own space. She's not lonely without him. She's whole without him. She has passions, pursuits, and dreams that are hers alone, and she nurtures them with the same care she gives to the relationship. So when he steps back or needs his space, she doesn't feel the need to compensate for his absence with clinginess or insecurity. Her foundation is solid enough that his distance doesn't create a void. It just creates room for her to continue living her life. Her independence isn't something she merely tolerates, like a passive existence. It's something she actively chooses and nurtures. She doesn't need to lean on him for emotional stability, social validation, or excitement. She's cultivated a sense of self that is so complete that even when he's not around, her world continues to move forward without hesitation. Her value isn't determined by his availability. She doesn't lose herself when he's not there, nor does she seek to fill the silence with desperate distractions. This is the kind of woman who understands that her happiness, her success, and her peace are all in her hands. She's aware that no one can complete her. She's already whole. So when he steps back to focus on himself, she doesn't chase after him to fill the gap. Instead, she respects his need for space because she knows her own life is already full. She's confident enough to let him go off into his own world and trust that he'll come back when the time is right. The difference? She doesn't attach her worth to his presence. She never makes him feel like the center of her universe because she knows her world is already big enough to stand on its own. Her strength lies in her autonomy. And in the end, it's this very self-sufficiency that makes her irreplaceable. Because when he comes back, he doesn't just find her waiting, he finds her living, thriving, and continuing her journey with or without him. And that makes his absence feel less like a void and more like a brief pause in a symphony that never stops playing. Number 11, she respects mystery without needing to solve it. She doesn't try to dissect him like a scientist looking for answers. She doesn't feel the need to get into every nook and cranny of his soul just to understand him. His mystery is not a problem to be solved. It's a part of him she respects deeply. She sees his complexity as a beautiful, intricate puzzle that doesn't need to be solved to be appreciated. In fact, the very fact that he has layers, nuances, and depths is what makes him so intriguing to her. She doesn't demand that every moment or emotion be explained in detail. She doesn't push for transparency or open the floodgates of his mind just to be comfortable in the relationship. She's not nosy, and she doesn't see his silence or withdrawn moments as something that needs to be fixed or analyzed. Instead, she allows him the space to exist fully as he is, without having to dissect every aspect of his personality or past. She's comfortable with the unknowns, the things that he may never share or may take time to reveal. She gets that some things can be real, can be deeply felt, without needing to be fully understood. In fact, it's his depth, his quiet complexities that pull her in, not because she's trying to crack him open, but because she recognizes that true connection doesn't require every single detail to be laid bare. This type of woman doesn't demand clarity in the places where mystery exists. She doesn't pressure him to spill everything or make sense of what's hidden. She doesn't make assumptions based on what she doesn't know. She simply respects that there are parts of him he chooses to keep to himself, and that's perfectly fine. She's aware that the most meaningful relationships are built not on unraveling every mystery, but on accepting the existence of things that are simply there. She doesn't have to know every answer to feel secure. She's confident in her understanding that there's beauty in the things that are left unsaid, in the spaces where his soul is allowed to breathe on its own. For her, mystery isn't something that causes discomfort. It's something that creates intrigue. She enjoys the subtle dance of getting to know him piece by piece in his own time. And that patience, that respect for the unknown, is what makes her different. She doesn't need to solve the puzzle. She's content with simply admiring its shape. She's at peace with the parts of him that remain unspoken, knowing that not everything needs to be revealed to be real. Number 12, she's emotionally unshakable, no drama, just depth. She doesn't let the winds of his moods blow her off course. While many would crumble or spiral when faced with his distance, she stays rooted. She doesn't need to create drama or make everything about emotional chaos. When he retreats into his world, she doesn't react with panic or neediness. She doesn't demand to know what's wrong or why he's pulling back. Instead, she remains steady, silent, yet strong. She's like a calm anchor in a storm, able to hold herself steady without letting the waves of emotion destabilize her. She understands that his silence or withdrawal isn't an attack on her. It's his way of processing, and instead of fighting that, she respects it. She doesn't chase after him, trying to fill the space with her own insecurity or doubt. She stays grounded, trusting that he'll return when he's ready, and in the meantime, she's not rattled. She knows that emotions, even powerful ones, are temporary, and they pass. She's seen enough of life to know that everything, both the highs and the lows, are fleeting. So when he pulls back, she doesn't fall into the trap of emotional turmoil. Instead, she's content, confident, and in control of her own emotional world. Her steadiness isn't about indifference, it's about inner strength. She's not emotionally dependent on him for validation or reassurance. She doesn't need him to fix her moods or smooth over her insecurities. She can navigate the ebb and flow of her own emotions, and when he's struggling, she's there to offer a quiet, grounding presence, not to add fuel to the fire. She's emotionally intelligent enough to know that sometimes silence is what's needed, not words or frantic energy. And when he does return to her, he finds a woman who is not shaken, not broken, but one who has simply weathered the storm without letting it touch her core. She doesn't need to make everything a spectacle. She's not looking for an emotional roller coaster. What she values is emotional depth, the kind of depth that doesn't unravel in a crisis or whimper under pressure. She knows that emotional strength doesn't come from shouting, fighting, or forcing someone to deal with her needs. It comes from calmly holding space for both herself and the other person, and that's exactly what she does. She's not fragile. She's the quiet force of nature that remains unmoved even when everything around her seems to be in chaos. At the end of the day, the woman strong enough to be with a Sigma male isn't someone who tries to fit a mold or chase after a fantasy. She's the rare, unfiltered woman who knows her worth, embraces her authenticity, and respects his need for space and independence. She's not intimidated by his silence, his intensity, or his complexity. Instead, she meets him with the same depth, the same strength, and the same self-assurance. It's not about playing games or performing in a relationship. It's about two people who, despite their different worlds, come together in a way that feels effortless, like two souls who just fit. She's not fragile. She's grounded. She doesn't need his attention to validate her existence. She creates her own. And yet when they come together, it's magnetic. She doesn't need to outshine him because her authenticity is what makes her unforgettable. With her, there's no need to try, just to be. And in that realness, in that unspoken understanding, there's an undeniable bond that transcends the ordinary, making their connection something truly extraordinary. The Sigma male may be an enigma, but with the right woman, his mystery isn't a barrier, it's a shared journey. She respects it, embraces it, and adds to the complexity without trying to fix it. She's the woman who doesn't need him to complete her, but complements him in a way that creates something bigger than the sum of their parts. In a world full of noise, she's the calm, the clarity, and the depth he never knew he needed. Together they don't just survive, they thrive, in a connection that feels as natural as it is profound. And that's the beauty of it all. When you find the woman who matches his wild, stands with him in silence, and disarms him with her realness, you've found something that can't be replicated. It's not about perfection. It's about two people who are perfectly imperfect, fully themselves, and yet perfectly in sync. That's the kind of bond that lasts, the kind that makes both of them stronger. If you enjoyed this deep dive into what it truly takes to be the woman strong enough to be with a Sigma male, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Join the community and stay connected with more powerful insights and eye-opening content. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if it resonated with you, and share it with anyone you think would find it just as intriguing. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for watching, and remember, when you connect with realness, everything else falls into place. See you in the next one.